Mr. President, and Senator Creighton, I have a table covered with questions, and I'll try to sensitive to the time that I want to share with others. But as I hear the dialogue, one question I would have would lead to another. And I want to get to the process of how you would implement this at the local level or even in a legislature that only meets every other year. But the first question I want to ask you is probably the most important. Are you aware we're having this discussion? The pain, the hurt, tears, thickness in their voice of Senator Miles and Senator West, two of our beloved colleagues that we on a regular basis talk about as family. Are you aware, have you discussed this topic, this proposal? Have you looked at their body language, their preparation? Because Senator Creighton, they're hurting. You and I cannot appreciate their hurt. That's the reason I'm going to ask you. One, you have any empathy for what they're going through as you discuss their history, our history. Their families were separated at birth, chained. Do you have any idea how you're removing the scabs, some of the most painful experiences, some of our fellow citizens, and two of our colleagues that, quite frankly, I think did a remarkable job this morning of showing an understanding of this process and not allowing it to become personal. Are you aware of what you're putting them through? Are you aware? That is something that I would ask you to comment on. Not within mine and your reach to understand what they're going through right now. Are you aware of what this proposal is putting them through?
Dean, you just asked me 7 times if I'm aware. You know, without asking me one time, that I am certainly aware. Of course you do. There's nobody. There are no members that I have more respect for on the floor than Senator West and Senator Miles. Of course you know, in asking me 7 times in a row if I'm aware, that you know I'm aware before you'd even ask me if I was aware. Of course, and I have had the conversations with them. I understand that they're not the only members that don't care for the legislation. We're not erecting any monuments with this legislation. I'm not aware of any legislation that is before us this session that called to take down Capitol grounds monuments. I'm not aware that anything was proposed along those lines. I am aware that I need to be, certainly as all members do, sensitive to every member's feelings on this floor. And I think in knowing me, as Senator Miles mentioned his respect for me, and I certainly have the greatest respect for him, that exchange should have told you what I'm aware of. So yes, the answer is absolutely the case. And as I mentioned, coming to Senator West's district to sit with stakeholders or to continuing to work in the future with Senator Miles on any unintended consequences, or with Senator Rodriguez as well, of course my intentions are good. And of course these topics are hurtful because it talks about the past in ways that I could never understand. But again, on the broader subject of facing our history, for people that looked like me back at that time and teaching correctly from it, so that I don't just get to walk past azaleas, but I walk past this walk on our Capitol grounds that I think is outstanding to reach the destination that we are here today with, which is the monuments I mentioned of late.
I'm not asking you about your feelings,
yes,
or my feelings.
Absolutely, and I answered that. I'm very much aware.
Can you appreciate? And I'm of the opinion, and I wish I had the ability to impress upon you the hurt that you're conducting right now to two of our colleagues, and quite frankly, the young African American interns, employees that are within hearing your voice that you're bringing up. This is not a history lesson. This is reality.
Yes.
And I just would urge you to consider, is there not a better way to do this? Could you not have a required vote today, which, let me ask you this, do you think this is a Republican-Democratic issue?
No.
Well, unfortunately, for several reasons, it's fixing to probably be, and I think it's so harmful to this body that ended on such a positive note last night, that we're probably, unless you'll yield and let this be studied, we're going to have a party line vote that I don't think is representative of our partisanship on this floor at all. I think it's kind of being forced on people to choose a side because of your proposal. And I think there's a better solution. But it's going to require, and I compliment you for not making us do this last night. I think it was only the right thing to do, and the leadership agreed. Left it to the body. But I think we still have time to save the division that this subject is causing. I think, quite frankly, can continue to have a dialogue, certainly with all of our colleagues. And just I would just ask you, would you consider not having a vote, keeping the discussion going forward, and maybe include others, including those local officials that you're going to force this upon? See, the concern that I have.
Excuse me, Senator, someone has a telephone on or a voice I hear on the floor. Would you be sure that's off, or maybe up in the gallery? Thank you.
I mean, I don't think, because we've been so focused on school finance, school reform, property tax relief, and obviously I've got a full agenda tomorrow in criminal justice. This is not a yes or no. This has a lot of gray. If I was of your persuasion, I'd say, what took you so long? You've been here 12 years, I think I calculated. If it was not an urgent matter when you got here and ran, why are you forcing this upon us today?
Senator Whitmire, the House author and I have been working on this issue for years. If we didn't start early enough, I'll leave that to your opinion on if we should have considered it sooner. But I can tell you, as in the special election of in the special session of after the last regular session to now, we've been working on this legislation.
And I'm familiar with that. I followed it, and it was a campaign issue.
The legislation is simply about process. It allows for public votes. It allows for legislative consideration.
What's the status of the legislation in the House?
What's that?
What's the status of the bill in the House? Really don't think the House. Do you believe the House is going to take up this issue on the House floor this session? Regardless of what becomes of this vote today?
Having been a House member, Senator Whitmire, I can still effectively say I never have any idea what is going to happen with Senate bills in the House. I think a reasonable,
objective student of the legislature would let you know the first week of May that bill is not going to reach the House floor. One of the reasons which you not agree is because they're working as such a cohesive, respectful of each other's service, that they're not going to bring a divisive issue to that floor when they need to be united, as we need to be united on a budget, so many other relevant issues that were issues in our most recent campaigns. Do you really think that House is going to take it up?
Yes, I do. I think this is a reasonable process for issues.
I mean, on the House floor for a record vote.
My answer is yes. I think this is a reasonable process and framework to have in place, and that the House, considering what a public referendum vote outcome could be for issues like this, is a healthy thing. That's why we're here during session on the thousands of bills that we'll consider.
Well, I think it's very regrettable that you have that opinion. You're certainly entitled to it. You've certainly spent years over there, as a number of us have. But if you watch that body work today, I would let you, I will speculate or assure you that that bill's not going to come on the floor. Let me talk about the process that you're setting up.
I consider this to be the most deliberative body
well, it
to be
was,
found.
We have certainly been recognized for that historically.
Yes. So if
when
we
you have
are,
a 2 year, when you have a 2 hour time frame,
taking
because they had to,
of the process.
Well, when you had to,
members, one at a time.
Would you not agree when you have to fit this legislation in between the significant issues of property tax reform, school forms, as we did last night, and you get a 2 hour window to do it, I don't know that you can still call us the most deliberative body, certainly as it relates to this issue, because I've got questions I'm not going to be able to get to. And let me ask you about the process that you say we're establishing.
Well, I don't agree with that, because we can focus our time on 5 issues out of thousands, and we may succeed with 5 of them, or we may succeed with none of them. But we can't ignore thousands of other issues that would allow for a framework to be in place.
You're not new to this process.
No, I'm not.
You're a state rep, you're a state senator, as I have been.
Yeah.
You know that we are not getting mail calls or any grassroots pressure to address this like we do. Property tax relief, water for Texas, criminal justice for Texas. In fact, before I sit down, can you tell me one example, put a face on it, where was this broken in the state of Texas? Where did somebody misuse their authority or judgment that was so egregious that it led to this day on the Senate floor? If you can do that, then let's go forward about how we address future issues involving it. Where was this problem arise from? It certainly wasn't the plaque that I think the Preservation Board removed because it was factually incorrect. That wasn't a broken system. The UT reaction, some of their statutes was carried out successfully. That's not broken. Could you help me with an example of where dealing with statutes and plaques that are over 25 years old, where is it broken? And how did we get to this stage?
We always work to improve processes here, Dean.
Are you familiar with Houston Reagan High School? Let me tell you something.
Did you ask me a question with the intent of needing an answer, or did you ask me a question with the intent of not giving me a answer?
I thought of a better one.
Member, Senator Whitmire, please.
I'm going to give you
Senator
an example.
Whitmire,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Senator Creighton, answer that question.
The example of statutes or plaques being mishandled in such a way that it led to us debating your proposal. Because if you can't, I'll give you a couple examples. Reagan High School.
No, I'd like to answer.
I will wait here till hell freezes over.
Senator Whitmire, you've asked a question. Senator Creighton.
I just need a runway, and I'll take off. It'll be a short flight. I promise you. Yes, the plaque is an example. The university removing monuments is an example, and at this time they're actually putting some of them back. Proposals for removal in the city of Dallas, proposals in the city of San Antonio for the same in Travis Park, where 2 councilmen, Warwick and Trevino, originally took office seeking all removal. Now Trevino has changed his mind after further reflection and study and decided that instead of removing Travis, depicting civil rights leaders in that Travis Park to face the Travis statue is a better and more reasonable approach.
What is broken?
Suggestions for Sam Houston's removal as well. This is a framework and a process, and we do this all the time in this building to provide clarity and direction for the public to rely on.
Let me make sure I understand. You think the way they handled those instances, local issues, was so broken, you got to bring it to Austin, where the body only meets every other year for 140 days. I don't know what you anticipate us doing during the interim when you've got a divisive issue that you're creating back on the removal of plaques and that process. Are you telling me that it sounded to me like most of the instances you named have been pretty successfully handled by the people closest to the citizens? How are they broken?
Well, for instance, under the provision of the bill that allows the city of Dallas, for instance, to obtain a grant to balance history in a way that if they would have known about it, maybe they would have chosen, instead of spending almost $500,000 to take a monument down, they would have placed a monument to balance history next. And then instead of erasing history or not facing it, they would have balanced it out in a way that the state could have helped. It's solution oriented with funding for those solutions that all, at the end of the day, leads to education and
would you
going
not think
forward together.
that those local officials came up with a process that has been accepted by the majority of the residents of Dallas? And instead, so what's broken about that? The local issue, very divisive, emotions, and the city leaders are resolving that in Dallas. So why do you want to, first of all, is it my understanding now you, in the middle of that you think is broken, you just solve it with an election?
I don't think the city of Dallas testified against the bill. But
because they've got better things to do. Let me ask you something.
Senator Whitmire, let's let him finish the answering your question, please.
Yes, sir.
Senator Creighton on the question.
Lacking that testimony against the bill by the city of Dallas or other cities, allowing for a public referendum vote, I think is a balanced way to give the public in that community, in that city, a voice on how they want to depict history going forward, or if they so choose, they can erase it.
Before we vote, help us understand the nature of that election. First of all, what if Dallas ignores your proposal? Who's going to enforce it? If Dallas just says, no, we're local, we have city leaders, we don't need Austin's help. Kind of like you talk about Washington as it relates to Texas. But what if they ignore the language in your bill? Who enforces it and would go to court or require them to have an election?
A resident could seek redress through the framework of the bill to ask the AG's office to look into it. And if a mandamus was issued, then it would go to a district judge.
And if a future AG refused to take action, what would become of your proposal?
I think under that situation that there would be no enforcement.
Who can donate? You talked about a campaign. Who can make a financial contribution to one side or the other? Are there any campaign restrictions monetarily, or, make sure we got security ordered?
Restate that. Help me understand why campaign donations are relevant in the bill.
Because what you're setting up is a potential firestorm, one of the most divisive in communities all across this state that are trying to come together. You're going to put a very emotional issue on the ballot. And I was just wondering, did you anticipate one side or the other having significant financial campaign support? Because it would make it a very unfair election if you have a group of well-funded individuals with strong beliefs overwhelm the other side's ability to raise money.
Senator Whitmire, I think the public referendum opportunity would dispel some of the firestorm that you're actually
Could they bring out-of-state monies, like maybe from Georgia or Alabama or other areas, into Texas to get involved in our local emotional issues about plaques and statutes?
I think Texans are well suited to run Texas.
No, I know they are. In fact, I think local communities are well.
I think it would be a Texas decision, and if there was an actual campaign effort for one outcome over the other, I know that as is the case with a lot of these referendums, that there would be those that would help on both sides promote a message.
Well, I wish you'd think, and there's one glaring unintended consequence that I think you're fixing to create, that you could have out-of-state folks that don't love this state but like to create conflict, often along racial lines or religious line or sexual orientation lines. You could easily be establishing a process for chaos in many of our communities. A couple of other questions, and I will yield to my colleagues. If you have to be 25 years or past, and I guess that's established by when the dome was built, for instance. So if Harris County residents decided that they didn't want to spend a couple $100 million more on the dome that has no stated purpose, in fact, it's not air conditioned, I understand. So it's been declared historical. To knock it down, you'd have to have a referendum or come to Austin, and you got senators from Lubbock and East Texas and across this state deciding what Houston Harris County is going to do with one of its historical sites called the Dome.
It would be more about if the dome was named after a figure of historical significance and changing that name than it would be.
The dome in itself, in many persons' mind, is historical in its own right. So you hadn't thought about that, I see. We'd be putting the dome's future in the hands of the Texas House and Texas Senate.
Not within the scope of the bill. No.
Let me close by asking you one last glaring example. Are you familiar with Reagan High School in Houston, in the Heights, in my district?
I know there's a Reagan High School there, and there's a Reagan High School just down the road here.
Last summer, it became very controversial about changing the names. Many wanted it, many did not. School board would make the decision, which I think was proper. Do you have any idea how many calls I got because I'm active in the community, have represented that particular neighborhood for 47 years? They attempted to pull me into that discussion. Familiar with that? That I was asked to resolve the naming of Reagan High School. Some wanted it, some didn't. Do you really think a state senator or state rep ought to be involved under your proposal in the naming of a local high school instead of the local school board, which ran to run the schools and protect their property?
If the school is under 25 years and located in a city, then it would be the city council that would decide or the school board that would decide. If it is over 25 years in age, the school itself, and it was a renaming, then the public would vote on it. Your question is, do I think a state senator should weigh in? Under this framework, you could politely say, no, thank you, there's a process for that, and it's local control.
But ultimately, your proposal would have me and the legislature making a decision to perhaps even override what the Houston School Board determined a consensus of opinion in that community was.
No, under the spirit of the bill, with the school being over 25 years of age, the school board would not decide at that point because the school is older than 25 years, the public would vote on it. So no, it would not come here. If it was state grounds, then it would be decided here on a vote by the legislature.
Would it be you say the school board would decide, or would it be the stakeholders? Where would the election be held? Across the entire school district, or just in the neighborhood that is served by that high school?
They could determine, just as the school board is elected and exactly where their polling places are, they could determine any issue that's decided for that particular school district in a manner that they always consider those election outcomes.
Keep talking about the spirit of the bill. Who's going to determine the true spirit of your proposal? You've referenced that to each and every one of us. The spirit of the bill is such and such. Who's going to be the determiner of the decider of the spirit of your bill?
Well, as authors, we all are asked, what is our intent? What is our purpose? What is the reason why we bring a particular bill forward? The reason why I use the rhetoric that you mentioned is because as the author, I'm expected to explain exactly what my intentions were. So what's your question?
My question is, in closing, do you have any idea numerically how many entities that we would be subject to reviewing their policies on statutes and plaques? 254 counties, I'm sure you're familiar with that figure, 1,050 school districts, and I don't know how many. Do you know how many cities, municipalities that we would have to review their policies potentially?
Well, I don't know exactly, but I know if there's a few hundred monuments across the state that on these particular policies or renaming efforts, the bill doesn't require us to review their policies or decisions.
No, they appeal it up here after a controversy. So have you talked to your colleagues or others the number that you think the legislature might have to deal with each year? And are you concerned that it might interfere with the budget consideration or school finance or other major pieces of legislation?
If there are negative consequences in a volume that you and I together cannot handle at this level, Senator Whitmire, then I'll work with you in the future to make adjustments. If we cannot handle the volume of what we would have to consider based on the way this bill works, I'll work with you on it.
You ever, as you've heard me reference, I deal with legislation on a regular basis, the greater good. Because I understand you have a perspective that, quite frankly, probably has support. But do you ever weigh the greater good? Is it the greater good of going forward, or the greater good to allow us to have a dialogue, to bring in other stakeholders? If you put this one to the greater good tests, to allow us to get on with the state's business, work with the House, keep this body as respectful as it was yesterday evening to one another and to the process. Is there any way at this point in this discussion you could put it to a greater good contest or judgment call?
Dean, I consider this legislation all-inclusive in a framework where we can all work together in a powerful way going forward. So I do consider it for the greater good. I really believe that we can all...
Going forward on this is a greater good than these 31 members, as we were last night, working as one with respectful disagreements. I thought yesterday, would you agree with me, was probably one of the better days that I've seen in this chamber in years. Would you not agree?
It was a great day.
Do you understand where I'm coming from? I think today is one of our worst days in recent years because I don't see the energy to do this. I don't see the merit to it. Not only I think it's hurting this body, but I know for a fact it's hurt two members more than I could ever describe. And let me close by saying your family's history that you described, historical experiences, is not much different than my family. And I just hope you would take in consideration that every minute we spend on this is taking us away from property tax reform, public safety, the budget, and things that I think we all campaigned on. I haven't seen my first campaign brochure, and I'm very active politically, I haven't seen the first campaign brochure dealing with this, except I think Senator Fallon, from a distance, I watched him use it in his race.
I agree that we consider many pieces of legislation that we don't campaign on, Dean. I'll work with you from here forward and every member that chooses not to support the legislation to continue to improve the framework that we've established for the process. Thank you very much, Dean.
Welcome.